Good evening, everybody. My name is Victoria. Welcome. Nice to see you all. And tonight we will be talking about risky play in the early years. So what is risky play? Sorry, excuse that. Risky play is thrilling and exciting forms of play that involve a potential risk of physical injury. That's the general definition. And a risky play in one form or another is a common feature of children's play in general, and of those who work with children or who have children of their own, they probably know that already. But children will naturally seek thrills and excitements and challenges. And risky play in general primarily takes place outdoors, where children engage in adventurous physical activities, trying to push the limits, overcome fears, conquer new areas or challenges that they haven't encountered before. And most risky play occurs during free play, so that's the time when children make their own choices, as opposed to structured activities where adults have prescribed learning outcomes in mind. And now let's have a quick look. How is the webinar going to be structured? So first we will talk about types of risky play. So there are generally 6 types of risky play. Some researchers develop a little bit of extended list, but I think we're just going to keep it to 6 types of risky play. This is the risky play that you most likely to observe in the early childhood. Then we will move on to benefits of risky play, which is quite a big topic. Later on, we will briefly touch upon barriers to risky play, opportunities that children might encounter. And then we will move on to, which I think might be quite useful for those of you who already work in earlier settings. We will look at the strategies, and challenges to creating an environment supporting risky play. And we will conclude the session with a short question and answers session at the end. Okay, so on to types of risky play. So first of the defined risky play, types of risky play, is great heights, where there is a danger of falling. So that would generally include climbing, jumping off objects, and they're usually quite high up, balancing on high objects, and hanging or swinging at great heights. Next, we have high speed, where there is a danger of collision. So that would be running at high speed, riding wheeled equipment at high speed. They could be bikes, scooters, shopping trolleys even, sliding, skating, and skiing at high speed. We're moving on to then dangerous tools, where there is a danger of injury, wounds, cuts, and so on. And these include hammers, cutting tools, but also gardening tools and household tools as well. What else have we got is dangerous elements, where there is a danger of falling from or falling into, or danger or injury by getting too close to something. So that includes playing on cliffs, and next to deep or icy water, or on icy water, actually, frozen lakes and so on. So fire, playing close to fire, source of fire, and derelict buildings, building sites, and so on. Now, another type of risky play is rough and tumble, which I have a feeling most of us know best from earlier settings. And there is obviously a danger of hurting each other or hurting oneself. And that includes all types of play fighting, which is wrestling, fencing with sticks, pushing, pulling, and all sorts. Now, the last of the types of risky play we will be looking at is the danger of disappearing and getting lost. So, sorry, that's the danger, disappear, get lost, where is the danger of actually getting lost. And when so this is defined as going exploring alone, playing alone in unfamiliar environments. But I must stress that when it says alone, it doesn't necessarily mean that the child, one individual child, wanders off into the unknown. It often means the group of children wants to avoid the adult supervision. So they like to hide away. So they like to not have a watchful eyes upon them. This is this kind of idea. So not necessarily, you know, you have a one child that's going to wander on their own. It's more sometimes group of children, they don't want to be seen. Benefits of risky play, which is, as I said, a big topic. So risky play, as just like all play in general, we all know is beneficial. It's in itself. So it's fun, it's thrilling, it gives you a good feeling inside, it's exciting, but there are real scientifically proven benefits of risky play, and this is what we're going to be focusing on. So helps develop critical thinking skills and problem solving as children learn how to consider consequences and the way to manage risks safely. And these are, so if we think about the children preparing for handling real dangers in real life, real dangers and risks, and sometimes repeating, they play even obsessively. So they go back for the same experiences almost, because they experience pleasurable excitement. Therefore, engaging children in risky play is one of the best ways, that's what researchers claim, of injury prevention that we can offer, because these experiences, this obsessive going back for the same kind of practicing the same skill over and over again until you reach the sort of mastery of it, these experiences lead to the ability to manage risks and, as mentioned before, avoid injuries. Now, next of the well-documented benefits is that risky play fosters children's confidence to have a go, try new challenges, fosters their resilience when things do not go as planned, as well as perseverance to keep on trying. And these skills are absolutely crucial for, obviously in itself, but if we think about academic achievement, academic learning, this is all, a lot of it is about having a go if you're not quite sure about the outcome. So let's think about child trying to pronounce the word for the first time, and they're not quite sure whether they get it right or not. But this idea that, you know, that we can still try, this is the little bit of a risk, that, you know, this is a little bit of excitement and there's a little bit of a unknown, but we can still have a go at that. And this, so answering the questions whether you're not sure is the right answer. And as I said, perhaps pronouncing the word for the first time, perhaps trying to write something for the first time. It's all, we forget very quickly as adults how challenging those first experiences are. And for some children, the fear of getting it wrong will stop them from even trying. And that's where the risky play, the benefits of risky play come in, because children will develop this ability to overcome those fears and have a go. Now, and next of the benefits is that risky play develops physical skills and abilities. And I think this probably is the most, if we think about it, it's probably the most obvious of the benefits. But it is still worth mentioning that motor skills, strength, balance, and coordination obviously develop when children engage in physical activities and push their boundaries and try things that they haven't tried before. Now, the risky play enhances self-esteem and well-being. And this is quite crucial. I think this is really, really important for us to think about, because self-esteem is something that we're gonna, I mean, all those things are beneficial, all those things are important, but self-esteem, well-being is the things that are often being overlooked in the early years. So we focus on, I don't know, pincer grip. We might be focusing on gross motor skills and fine motor skills, but we perhaps somehow maybe not forget, but maybe not put enough emphasis on children's self-esteem and well-being. Because if this is not in place, then it's very difficult to feel confident and feel reassured of your own abilities as a person, not just a child, but adult as well. So when it says the enhances self-esteem and well-being, it means that children attempting something they have never done before, on the borderline of the feeling of being out of control, often because of height or speed, they overcome fears, and rather than the avoidance of that fear, emotion of fear, a more freeing emotion is experienced. So that kind of, this sort of good feeling that comes from managing to do something for the first time, managing to do something for yourself, and these experiences building on this experience, this is how it enhances self-esteem and well-being. And therefore, one of the research that I came across, it really stresses, but it's not the only one. There's a big body of evidence that important aspects of risky play might be the anti-anxiety effect of exposure to typical fears provoking situation, in the combination of positive emotion and relative safety of the activities that children chosen to do, and the combination of positive emotion and relative safety with child's coping behavior that they just developed or learned to develop. And so therefore, it is possible that risky play is a natural way of reducing many anxious reactions, which is very important because we know that children, there is a big emphasis on children's well-being and mental health, and it's proven, scientifically proven, that risky play opportunities will help children to cope with anxieties of everyday life by being exposed to those feelings and being able to master those feelings for themselves. We will then look at potential barriers to risky play. So not all children have equal opportunities to access the risky play. And these are, this might be to do with the social and economic factors, physical environment, safety legislation, and adults' attitude to risk-taking. So let's look at the social and economical factors. Potentially, that could mean that access to environments that promote risk-taking, so the environments that we mentioned before, outdoors environment, forests, seashores, potentially are the best natural environment supporting risky play. Adventure playgrounds are another great place to access those opportunities. But social and economic factors might prevent children from accessing it. So, for example, in the inner city, you might not have easy access to forests, seashores, obviously. Adventure playgrounds are closing down, unfortunately. There's still some, but due to financial, for example, factors, you might not be able to travel. The child's situation might be affected by the parents' financial situations, and the travel to those places where they can access those opportunities might be limited. Furthermore, the access to good quality early years settings where there might be opportunities for risk-taking can also be either to do with financial constraints or just the social and local situation of the earliest settings. We know that loads of nurseries close down nowadays, and so some children are just simply not able to access these opportunities because of the social and economic factors. Now, physical environment. When we talk about physical environment, so we look at the places spaces that are either over-structured, so they very much don't give many more opportunities apart from what's expected from them. So this would be playgrounds where there might be very little equipment and very little chances for children to, for example, climb high or jump, or there could be places that are not safe for playing. So risky play in risky places is not what we are trying to promote. We're trying to promote risky play in environments that are meant to support risky play, but not those environments that promote hazardous attitudes towards children's play. So so environments that are not safe in general. Another barrier to accessing risky play within the physical environment could be environments that are not inclusive. And when I say not inclusive, that mean not inclusive for children, for example, whose mobility is impaired, so children on wheelchairs, but also babies who are not able to move by themselves freely, and they are limited to where they can, the spaces that can be accessed with the parent and the child, or carer and the child. Now, safety legislation, and I think this is a big one for all of us working in early years. We all know about health and safety, we all know about injury prevention, and all these things, I think, for us practitioners working with children, mean that we might be deliberately avoiding the risk play situation because of the risk that are involved, the risk of injuries that are involved. Now, adults' attitudes towards risky play, and this can be personal bias, this could be cultural bias. So this could be something that we bring with us from our home upbringing, from the countries that we come from. These ideas of what is risk and how risk is managed, and whether we should or shouldn't expose children to risky play behaviors, or encourage those rather than expose. So another within the adults' attitudes, there can be an age or gender. So I will talk about it a little more when we talk about challenges to creating spaces for children. I will talk about the gender, and I will talk about attitudes a little bit more. But these are the barriers to risky play. Now we will move on to strategies to creating environments supporting risky play. So first of all, what is risk might be understood differently by different persons in different situations. Therefore, as I mentioned before, creating environments that facilitate risky play does not mean creating risky environments. It's the actual opposite. So risky play needs to be happening in an environment that is safe for children, that is free of hazards, or as much as possible, obviously. And children assess the environments based on what they afford. And this is affordance theory developed by Gibson in 1979. And he argued that, for example, tree affords climbing, buttons afford pushing. So children, when they see different objects in the environment, they assess them based on what can they do with them. So environments affording greatest risks, risk-taking, are usually outdoors. This is what I mentioned before, outdoors. And examples could be forests, could be seashores, can be, I don't know, dunes, and just any natural environments that children can freely explore. Another great example are adventure playgrounds that basically design to create opportunities to risk-taking. Within the early years settings, practitioners can create the environment that affords risk-taking by providing children with so-called loose parts. And loose parts are the resources that can be moved, rearranged, and that can include plastic crates, large planks of wood, large wooden blocks, tires, branches, but not only that. There can be stones, there can be all sorts of things that children can create and can move. It could be even sand and water. It is also beneficial for children to use tools such as hammers, nails, saws, and knives. And this is not new or controversial. These are the things that are already happening in loads of nurseries. I have worked across loads of different settings. I'm not based in one setting, so I go over to loads of different nurseries. And the things I have observed is those large planks that are being used outside, they're quite often being used for balancing, balancing planks. The plastic crates can be used for children to stack them up try to climb on them or use them in any way they want. Tires can be rolled, can be pushed, children can climb into them. Wooden blocks, completely open-ended resources. You can do anything you want with wooden blocks. But in terms of using tools, I have seen myself, there are sets of child-friendly hammers. They're still hammers, but they're not as heavy as the hammers that will be used by adults. And nails, and the sets of little sort of wooden shapes that they can be nailed onto a bigger kind of wooden tray. And this is being used in a number of nurseries that I came across. Another example, which I haven't mentioned here, is this links to this idea of children wanting to be hiding, they're wanting to be away from adults, wanting to be lost. What I have observed in some of the nurseries, use of those big round traffic mirrors. So in the places where children feel like nobody's watching, the clever use of mirrors in crucial points actually means that adults can still see them, but the children have this sense of freedom and being away and exploring for themselves. Another thing, in terms of use of tools, is, I don't know if any of you ever worked or came across London Early Years Foundation settings, and they often have knives and cutting boards, chopping boards, and fruit or vegetables for children to cut. So the children and an adult sit at the table, and children, with the supervision obviously and some guidance and instruction, use knives to chop fruit and vegetables. Maria Montessori inspired settings will often have the same kind of approach. The children cut their own fruit for snack, and those knives are not necessarily the sharp chef's knives, but they still can cut, and they still are being used by children. And more children use them, the less instruction they need, and the more, as we all, more proficient they become in using those knives and tools safely. So these are the some strategies, and obviously this is just sort of a tip of iceberg, because every setting is different and every space is different, and what can be achieved in different spaces is obviously a very individual thing. But I think it's more about the mindset. So how can we promote risky play and risk taking in play while being there and obviously supporting children and ensuring they are safe, which is then links to the next section, which talks about challenges to creating environments supporting risky play. And these challenges faced by practitioners relate to some of the barriers that we mentioned. And I think the biggest one, as I said obviously already, is the safety legislation. Emphasis on keeping children safe from injuries affects how we view, how we approach the risk taking in general, and parents' expectations of obviously keeping children safe, high level of accountability that we all face as practitioners working with children, might have negative impact of creating risky play opportunities. Adults' attitudes, which is again one of the barriers towards these forms of play, also play a role. Careful adult supervision is crucial to ensure children's safety. However, personal bias need to be acknowledged and examined. And there is a strong body of research that indicates that practitioners' gender, as well as the personal attitudes to risk-taking, plays a big role. So the research shows that male practitioners are generally those who are more happily engaged in risky play along children, are those who will be more likely or more willing to create risky play opportunities. And are less likely to stop risky play. And when I say that, I often mean rough and tumble. That these are the male practitioners that have more liberal attitude. Let's put it this way: liberal attitudes to giving children opportunities to engage in this risky play. Next thing is obviously the cultural bias. We all come from different, not necessary in terms of the countries we come from or the cultures we come from, but we all have our own, how we were brought up and what we believe is beneficial, what we believe is acceptable when taking risks. And all this are not, it's not to put it into judgment whether that's a good thing or bad thing, but these are the things that we need to be aware of. So the same like all the bias that practitioners might have. We come into the situation where we interact with children, we interact with parents, we might have a particular views that will inform our practice. But whether we know about it, whether we are aware of that, that's another story. And from my experience, in settings where there is a general attitude, so the management attitude towards risky play is very much that of facilitating these opportunities, then practitioners' attitudes will, even though they might have personal bias, they will be leaning towards creating those opportunities. But if the setting within itself doesn't have that culture, then it's very difficult to then create these opportunities and be able to have arguments that basically positive things to say about risky play. And this, I think, is the linking with the safety legislation is one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, if anyone's got a question, just unmute yourself. Yeah, that was very interesting, and I think I've been reading quite few things about risky play and attitude in a kind of systematic attitude into children being free to move around. There is a whole report recently been published, I think 2022, about children being able to kind of go out by themselves and play by themselves. And there was a very interesting study from Switzerland where they had children who went the same amount of time with the parents to the playground, and then there were children who were actually in an environment that parents were able to let the children to go by themselves to the playground because it was kind of gated community. And the children who were allowed to go by themselves created longer relationship, were laughing more, had a much better motor skills, and it's just because they had that freedom of explore and things like that. And also there was this interesting, sorry I didn't take it out, but there was this interesting thing where they were asking children what is a play, and soon as there was an adult, they didn't consider it as a play. They thought that it's like a teaching, educational kind of thing. So children need to feel that they are by themselves. So I find it really, really fascinating. And I wasn't even aware of, how children see the play compare how we see the play. So
I think it's very interesting what you mentioned, because this idea that we somehow, so we think we're just neutral observers, but we're not. When there are adults present, it almost feels like there is a sort of almost like a testing kind of situation. So the children kind of the level of relaxed kind of approach to what's happening, it kind of almost takes the second place to like being able to explain yourself why you're doing this and what is the purpose of this. But often it's like it doesn't really. Children don't think about the purpose of it. They just engage in something and they don't think about, what am I learning from this situation? What is this that I'm doing? And what is the purpose of it? Is it just, well, it feels good. So let's just
they kind of go into that flow state. Well,
exactly.
I don't know. It's really interesting. There was also one kind of interesting story I had with family relatives as well, because our children, we kind of in an environment where my children were brought up quite in the woods and doing all the climbs and things, and sometimes it's really hard as a mother to see your child doing dangerous thing, and it's even harder when I was a nanny. That was even harder. You know, it doesn't really, you don't get so scared when it's your own child, but when it's someone else's child, oh, it could be your career over. So it's really kind of quite tricky for people who are working in an environment, especially if you are a nanny, that you are the only one person with them. You don't have that support of the colleague to making sure that everything is safe, and you know, and they have that environment that they can explore. But it was very interesting because those relatives were living in an environment where they were not very much exposed to the risky play, whereas my children were. And it was quite interesting how many injuries they had throughout we went on holiday together for about 2 weeks, because they just were not used to, and they wanted to do the same thing as our children. Whereas our children were kind of knew what they can, what they cannot do, and yet they took a little bit of risk. But those little ones from our relatives, they were taking much more risk because they wanted to be like them. And we had so many injuries. We had children in a lake, we had a cut lip, we had you know, knees, so many bruises with those relatives. So yeah, I think there is this worry about children getting injured, but actually they learn, you know, yeah, what they can do.
I've during my studies I came across this really interesting, so if anyone ever has a chance to read something by Barbara Rogoff, who has spent 25 years working as an anthropologist across well, tribes in Africa, but as well as South America, and this kind of idea of what we consider risky, of what we consider the children are capable of. When I look at the cultural kind of influences, it changes the perspective so much, because in that book there are photos of 11-month-old babies with machete chopping fruit, and just because they have been shown how to do that time and time again, they had an opportunity to watch that, had an opportunity to practice, they will consider skillful handlers of really sharp objects, something that we can't even, like 11-month-old baby, they barely walk, they barely can like suck their own thumb. And these are the babies with the machete chopping coconuts and tending fires and playing in, obviously, in the forest. And these are the kind of things that we, perhaps living in the societies that we live now, we, because of that, as you mentioned, Renata, you know, when practitioners or parents, they fear of child's injury stops you from allowing them to actually try. And this, as it was mentioned in this presentation, these opportunities to create those to actually not create, to take those risks are actually the best injury prevention that you can possibly have, because once you will fall, a second time you will fall, the third time you will learn how to do it not to fall. And it's the same with everything, and it's the same with us. And I think we just forget that this is the learning process. Nobody knows how to do these things from day one. We have to go step by step, learning to keep safe. And how do we learn to keep safe if we're not being exposed to dangers? It's very difficult. But it is, I think it's one of the biggest challenges, how to manage that kind of expectation. We're going to keep your children safe if you are the practitioners, or how to, the conversations that need to be happening between the practitioners and nannies or early years practitioners within a setting and parents. I think this is where the challenge really exists, because then you can maybe find out where we at, what are the parents' expectations, what are your attitudes, because I'm as a parent myself, and I know, as you said, this kind of idea of watching your children climbing really high, of doing things that you're not quite sure if they're capable of. I sometimes had to just stand around and walk away, because I know that if I would stay there, I would stop my daughter from climbing that high. And I know she can do that, and I know I knew that she could do that, and if she couldn't, then I was there close enough to help her. But I just almost had to take a step back, because I didn't want to prevent her from taking I don't know, almost like projecting my own anxieties onto her, because it's very difficult, isn't it?
I know. And it's quite, I had to very often stop myself, because I kept saying to my children, like, don't do that because you're gonna fall, don't do that. And it's probably not the best way to approach it, because very often they kind of learn through those mistakes what is their limit,
and I think it's almost like a proverbial kind of, that you learn from your own mistakes, not from somebody else's telling you, but you need to learn from you need to burn yourself to know to blow next time.
Yeah, I know. So we just need to make sure that, you know, we kind of create that environment that there is as little injuries as possible, but, you know, we can't completely you know, rub them in the cotton wool, because once we let them to the world, it's exactly like with my relatives, you know, they kept getting injuries and injuries because they just were not used to, you know, being in the woods and climbing trees and jumping off the trees and things like that. They just were copying our children, yeah. So okay, so I don't see any questions coming in. So thank you so much. Thank you, Victoria, for coming tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And hopefully we'll see you. The next webinar you're going to do is on gender stereotypes. And that's very interesting as well, isn't it?
Next, gender stereotypes.
Very interesting topic. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope I'm going to see you there. So thank you very much and all the best. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you on our other webinars.
Thank you for watching our video. For more London School of Childcare Studies content, see our social media or visit our website childcarestudies.co.uk.